Good morning, everyone. I'm Gina DeSalvo, the Director of Tufts Parents Giving Program and your host for this weekend. I am beyond thrilled to have so many families here. We have 4,100 people registered for the weekend, 1,000 more than we've ever had in the past, and we've had a number of walk-ins. So welcome. We are so happy to have you here. We have a wonderful day here. I know you can't wait to hear our keynote presentation today, but I want to just go over a few quick notes. If you haven't picked up your name tag yet, or it's across the street in Sophia Gordon Hall. On the back of it, it has the QR code that has the schedule for the rest of the weekend. Most of the sessions are mainly down in this area this afternoon, and then we have the Avenue of the Arts Festival all afternoon, which will be really fun. Check out the athletics games. It will be a really vibrant day on campus this weekend. A few little housekeeping notes. Please there's no smoking, drinking, or eating in Cohen Auditorium right now. And I also just wanted to quickly make note of when you came in, you were given some cards with a QR code that's for Slido to submit questions. If we have enough time, we will get to them a little bit later in the presentation. So many of you were very gracious and submitted questions in advance, and we have incorporated those into the conversation today with Lisa and Tim and President Kumar. So on that note, I am eager to introduce to you Tufts' 14th president, Dr. Sunil Kumar. Born in India, Sunil received his master's and bachelor's degrees from the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore and from the Mangalore University, respectively. He earned a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In addition to his role as president, Dr. Kumar also serves as professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here in the School of Engineering. Prior to Tufts, Sunil served as the provost of Johns Hopkins University from 2016 to 2023, and as dean of the University of Chicago's Booth School of Management from 2011 to 2016. Before that, he has spent 14 years on the faculty of the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. I know he looks way too young to have that long of a career. At Tufts, Sunil is strongly committed to preserving and enhancing the emphasis on a liberal arts education within a tight-knit and student-centered environment, while also enabling conditions that foster cutting-edge teaching and world-class research through Tufts' many graduate and professional schools. To achieve these ends, he has introduced 5 broad pillars as strategic aspirations at Tufts, which I'm sure he will hit on in a bit. I'm now going to turn the stage over to our Parents Leadership Council co-chairs, Tim and Lisa Harkness, who are proud double jumbo parents to daughters in the classes of 2021 and 2026. And they don't have any more, so I'm going to lose them after that. Once again, thank you for coming this weekend, and I am thrilled that you are here. Welcome to the community, and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you for the weather you have ordered up this weekend. I just want to welcome President Kumar, who has said that we should call him Sunil, and I think that is remarkable when you think about a university of this size and the accessibility and the openness of a president sitting here waiting to be pelted with questions. And I also want to say welcome to the parents and all the friends who are here. You are now part of the jumbo herd, and so you are jumbos just like we are jumbos, and we're so thrilled that you're here. The format today is a little bit different, and I think it's super exciting. Many of you have questions for Sunil and have sent them in. And so we are going to have a conversation so that you can hear him talk about some of the issues that are on your minds. And I'm sure in 45 minutes or an hour, we're not going to get to all the questions. But President Kumar, Sunil is so accessible. If you have questions, you can send them in by email. And I do think that lots of the things we're going to talk about today will help all of us have a better understanding of what's going on.
Great. So I'm going to start with a pretty broad question. You've been here for a year. Fundamentally, what do you think? What do you think of what's going on campus. What do you think of the students? Remember, we're the parents of those students. But seriously, it's been a complicated year, and as parents, an exciting one for our children, is seeing what's been going on campus that's been going well for them. But we all know that there's a lot of things going on campus that we might not see. What are your impressions 1 year in?
Well, it was an uneventful year. I'm kidding. I could have pulled a year out of a hat and gotten an easier one to start, but then that said, it's been a learning year, as you would expect, and not just for me, but for American higher education as a whole, I think, on many fronts. But I want to start with kind of my impressions of Tufts, and I think what we did right and what we are learning. So what I think the impression of Tufts is, and it's this group today, 4,000 parents here today, exemplifies this. It's a happy place. This is regardless of all that you saw on Instagram. The problem with Instagram is that it's a time expander. What lasts 20 minutes on campus lasts 20 weeks on Instagram and is played over and over and over again to a point where you get an impression of campus that was very far from the reality on the ground. It wasn't to say we didn't have our moments of tension and things we could have done differently and better, but for the most part, this is a happy place. And I'll give you an example of this. The freshmen start a week, and if you're in global orientation, you start 2 weeks before the beginning of class. And this kid, my wife keeps telling me, don't call them kids, but this kid walks up to me. The freshmen live across the street from us, so we have to necessarily walk past each other every day, all the time. And he says, it was 5:30, I was going back home, and he's going back to his dorm, and he says, President Kumar, how was your first day? Mine was great. Well, that exemplifies Tufts. And in terms of what we did well, I think we walked the line between living up to values of free expression and supporting activism, at the same time enforcing our rules. And it's not an easy line to walk. Did we get it right every time? Absolutely not. We're learning as we go along. But I think for the most part, we ended up in a reasonable place. That's how I would characterize it. Now, that said, there's a lot going on at the university, including formation of plans, as you would expect in the first year, and so on, which I'm happy to elaborate. So why don't I stop there for first impressions?
Terrific.
Excellent. So Gina noted your 5 pillars in her introduction.
Right.
Can you help us understand what those are and how that figures into the impact on the university?
So, of course, what separates man from other higher primates is the innate urge to make lists. And so they don't trust presidents who don't have lists, so I have one.
With only 5 things.
Yeah, because that's about, I have to remember them at many occasions. If we had 12 and I missed one, they would ask me about it. What's the 12th one? And you'd be embarrassed. So the 5, the first one is straightforward. We take student-centered at Tufts seriously. Our members of the National Academy teach. Right? This is not a place where teaching is an adjunct function in the university. We take our students seriously. People care deeply about the students. And so educating responsible leaders is the first pillar. And I'll spend on the first 2 pillars more time, given that you're parents and you probably want to know how we're thinking about it. Those words are picked with care. The word leader is picked with care. And the reason is we have a 10% admit rate. For every 1 kid we let in, like your children, we turned away 9. And given that there is a responsibility on the student to take advantage of the Tufts education and do something good with it. And so I think the developing leaders is extremely important, and developing in the way that they would be responsible members of society going forward is also very important to me. So that has both a who do we bring in, how do we educate them, and how do we launch them on their future success. All components of those matter. And on the who do we bring in, when we bring in somebody, we do meet all demonstrated financial needs. So we take care of the people we bring in. But we cannot bring in as much economic diversity in the class as we would like. We are about 12% Pell. Princeton, by comparison, is about 25% Pell. Pell is the bottom 2 quintiles of the socioeconomic spectrum. And so we don't want to lose sight of our roots. We were not founded as an elite, expensive college. We were founded as a place in 1852 for those who didn't make it into their place down the street. And we are not supposed to lose sight of that, right? We have to be proud of our roots, and so who we bring in matters. Investing in their curricular success and co-curricular success while they're here through wraparound services matters. It's something that we are planning to invest a fair bit in advising, core curriculars, mental health, etc. And in fact, last year in every matriculation speech, I make the same statement, which is I just worry that our selection procedure for students has gotten to the point that if you can't precisely answer the question, what have you done to make the world a better place by 10:30 this morning, you're somehow considered a failure. I mean, that is just too high a bar on a 20-year-old, right? So I give out an award every year for the most useless event that the students can come up with. And I take that seriously. College should be fun. My 4 years, I remember 3.5 of them, and college was terrific. I mean, the best 4 years of my life. And I want our students to have the same experience. So the student experience is the second part of this pillar. And before I go to student experience, one last thing I'll say. Career services is something that we intend to invest in. In particular, I'd like our students to experiment more, not to get a job, but to find their purpose in the real world. So I want them to not all become bankers. That would be a shame. But rather, apologies to the bankers in the audience. But we want them to experiment. And when somebody tells me I want to be a banker, I say, well, maybe you should go work as the receptionist for Congresswoman Clark, just to get the other side of the story and figure out what it is that you like. So that's something that we'll invest in. And on the student experience, one of the things that the parents of upperclassmen will attest to is that housing discontinuity between the second and third year is pretty dramatic, right? When you're on campus, it's great, and suddenly you're kicked off campus. And Medford and Somerville have become much more expensive. As a consequence, the places that our students can afford are, I think the technical term for them is dumps. So we are going to build 680 beds on campus. That project is already underway. Along Boston Avenue, we are going through our permitting processes at this point. The cities are very supportive because housing is such a priority in this region. The fact that we are able to bring students back on campus is viewed very positively by the cities. So that's something we'll do. And also some more investment in an aquatic facility. I think, I don't know how many of you have seen our swimming pool, but it was built 77 years ago. It doesn't look a day over 76, but, we are planning to build a new one because everybody swims. Right, you build a hockey rink, South Indians like me who believe ice belongs in a whiskey glass have no real interest in hockey, but swimming, everybody swims. And so as community building, that's, I think, useful. So that's the second one. The other three priorities I'll do relatively quickly. One of the hallmarks of Tufts has always been civic engagement. We talk the talk, we have the Tisch College, Dana Cunningham is here, the dean of the Tisch College. But the idea that somehow tangibly makes every student's experience different, it touches every student's life and makes it different, where they engage meaningfully in society, while they're still students, I think is the important part that we need to invest in and expand, and something we will do. The fourth and fifth pillars have less to do with the undergraduate class but are relevant. One is we have some areas of excellence in research where we are truly world class. I mean, infectious diseases is an example of that. Tissue engineering is another example. I can go down the list, of course, but I'll spare you. We want to invest behind those and grow our research footprint. I think it behooves us to do more than our fair share on addressing some of society's most pressing problems. And if you ask, how would I characterize the strength of our research footprint, it is really in two areas, sustainability and life. Broadly, you could define our strength in those two areas. And I'm happy to elaborate more if people have questions. And the last one, tuition is growing at around 4% a year, which is, right now, real rate is not that high, but it's not long-term sustainable. We cannot keep going. I don't want to be the president when we announce the six-figure tuition number, right? That's a bad day. And so we have to generate revenue through broader array of programs. One of the areas where some of our peers have done better than we have is mid-career. So educating people who are halfway through their careers, for example, taking bench scientists and teaching them data science and AI is something we can do, something we are doing, but we can expand. And also building partnerships with large organizations. For example, we do a training program for senior diplomats at Fletcher from the ASEAN countries. It's something that we'd like to do more of. So you can imagine various other venues beyond undergraduate education to develop revenues for the university so that we can continue to subsidize the undergraduate program. So anyway, I'll stop. Those are the 5 pillars.
I'm just going to do a follow-up. So I know we like to keep it at 5 so you can remember.
Right.
But as a parent who's had one child graduate and another who's here as a junior, I see a 6th. And
Okay.
I see a 6th that I will broadly say you started with, which is happy kids and kind kids.
Right.
And I think that kindness and collaboration and happiness go together.
Right.
And it may be the umbrella over your 5, but when I see the value of that kindness and that collaboration come together in the learning
Right.
and in the living and in the athletics, I think it creates this sort of wonderful accelerator in how they mature and how resilient they are. So that may be not a question, but just a thought about number 6.
Yeah, no, I'll respond to that. When people ask me, do you like Tufts to be more like, and they will list a long list of potential universities, my answer is absolutely not. We don't want Tufts to be like any other institution. We want Tufts to be better at being Tufts. Right, so, and this happiness component is part of that, this collaboration, this feeling that students take care of each other. That thing has very much got to be part of any approach. Anything that breaks that secret sauce would be a mistake. It genuinely will be a mistake, right? So, hence my funding of the Taylor Swift concert. That was the most useless event. That won the most useless event last year. So, they call it something else, not the most useless event, but anyway, so yeah.
That's great.
I funded the Taylor Swift concert too for my daughters too, but not the same way.
Right.
So I'd like to drill down a little bit on the second pillar. You were talking about new dorm and some of the other buildings that are happening. And to go to the sixth pillar, the happiness, a lot of it is engagement. How are you thinking about the role of physical change of the space? I know there's discussion about changing the library, and it's how it is even conceived as a physical space, the dorm, the other buildings that you mentioned. How are you thinking about that and facilitating interaction with students?
Yes, so this is a very good point. Many of our facilities were built for a class that was about a third smaller than the class is now, right? So they were built when we were admitting about 1,000 students a year. And we now admit over 1,600, so it's a much larger class. So the campus center, for example, is a little too small. The second is, so we do need more spaces where there are serendipitous interaction among our students. Right now, everything, they have to book a room to have a club. They have lots of clubs and they have a lot of organized interaction. What we don't have much space for is places where you can have serendipitous interaction, where people can just run into each other. So one of the things we're going to do, and I'm not sure the parents will be entirely in favor, and I'm not doing this to be popular because I'm not elected actually. So we will revive the pub. Those of you who are alumni will remember there used to be a pop-up pub. And one of the reasons we are doing that, it will come with a buffet so that the underclassmen have something to do. If they go there, they can eat, and because we will card seriously, and it will have a, X drink maximum and all that. And the reason we are doing this is if they only party in the basements of off-campus housing, they do two things. One is they stick to a smaller and smaller group. So this is what I meant by serendipitous interaction. You want people's group to be broader when they come out. You want them to have friends, make friends with people that they had nothing in common with. And so for that to happen, we do need to provide spaces. So we will be thinking about that. The pub is a first step where we are reusing space. This is a cafe during the day, and at night it will turn into a pub. And very carefully controlled, of course, not to the point where they stop going there because it's not the cool place to go, and maybe have live music and things like that. So, but the idea being, again, you run into people that you wouldn't run into if you only went, with your athletic team or your club or somewhere else.
Terrific.
So yesterday I had this great conversation with Dean Lee, the Dean of the Engineering School. And he talked about the importance of ethics as we move into this more technological age. And I think we all see life changing very quickly, technology coming into many of our lives. And here we have our children at a liberal arts school getting a liberal arts education. And I'm a huge fan of it when I see what it's done for the resilience of my kids and the conversations we can have. But I'd love if you can talk about how you see the value of a liberal arts education in this changing environment, and do majors really matter?
Well, I think my department will disown me if I said majors didn't matter. But on a more serious note, people ask me, how do you defend liberal arts? And I tell them, it doesn't need defense. And here's why. Think about coding. Right? When I was an undergrad, you had to learn 4 languages. None of the 4 are used today. None are used. I learned COBOL and Fortran 77, and nobody's heard of them. And so the whole point of education as information transfer has eroded to a point where it's bordering on meaningless, right? So what you want to do is to then talk about what is the function of the education. Part of it is curation, telling people how to sift through all the information there is. Part of it is teaching people how to learn, which is non-trivial, by the way. But most importantly is to teach the basic principles of liberal arts education, to understand what it means to be human, what it means to be skeptical. Because if there's one shortcoming I find in freshmen, when the high schools leave them with very little skepticism. They've all picked their Kool-Aid and drunk it. And it's a bad, bad idea. I know that I'm old enough to realize what the root of that word is, and I apologize. But you got to be skeptical of every side. Everybody is kind of full of it. And, including me, by the way. You should be deeply skeptical of me. And that is what reading literature does, philosophy classes do. And finally, history is extremely important. It's amazing how many times the wheel gets reinvented. George Santayana's line is my kind of absolute favorite, which is, those who fail to read history are doomed to repeat it. So this is, So for me, this is not a hard sell at all.
Yeah.
And it's something that, at least on my watch, will never go away in Tufts. The idea that somehow we need to transfer more information to our students to prepare them for the first job where that knowledge will last them a total of 18 months is ridiculous. We want to step back and say, we want to teach you something that will help you the rest of your life. And that has to be something deeper than, for example, picking up COBOL, which, by the way, in my school counted as humanities course. Because they did not consider COBOL rigorous enough. I went to engineering school. They didn't consider it rigorous enough to count as a real programming language.
And I think it will resonate with many of us who are hiring, I won't say kids because we can't call them kids, but students who are graduating from college, that we really appreciate the well-roundedness of someone who can not only write a great email, write a great one-pager, as well as do the math, right? So even the external world, not only the questioning part, but having the skills to sift through things and then communicate back is important.
Right, indeed, indeed.
So a bit earlier, we were talking about your aspirations about increasing the percentage of the students who are have Pell Grant, are Pell Grant recipients. You've talked about having a more integrative social life where people are meeting different kinds of people more. It sort of made me think of the social mobility potential of a university like Tufts to take people who are maybe first gen or otherwise not as comfortable in an institution like this, and then have the institution be an engine for social mobility. How do you think about that issue, and what programmatic pieces of the university academically, extracurricularly, fit in with that social mobility mission?
Yeah, so I see it as three parts. The easier part, which is what most people mean when they say social mobility, is simply the ability to provide financial aid, right? Just to bring students in who are more economically diverse. And as you know, other forms of diversity now start to tee off of economic diversity given the Supreme Court decision and so on, right? So for us, the ability to dig deeper in our pocket is a way to diversify the class. So given that, the next two things are, for me, the true value add that Tufts can provide. One is better wraparound services. So our graduation rates are excellent. So our overall graduation rates are around 94%. So 6% of our student body does not finish at Tufts. That doesn't seem like a lot unless you control for the fact that our admit rate is 10%. So given that much selectivity, why are 6% not making it through is actually important for us to think about. Now, some fraction of them leave in the first year because they always wanted to go to another institution, they got into it as a transfer student, and so they're going. So that's fine. That's 1 or 2%, we don't have a problem with that. The rest leave for various reasons, and I do view that as a failure on our part. So investing, and so we've just appointed, the provost, Caroline Jenko, is here, and Caroline appointed an associate provost for student success, whose primary job is to make sure we have good advising, good curricular support, not in a remedial way, but generally available, so that people make it through the program. I'll give you one important kind of statistic. If you ask what is a well-known predictor of completion of a degree, they're using that bar as success, it's straightforward what that predictor is. It is having one adult who believes you can do it. Now, you are all engaged parents, that's why you're here. That one adult is one of you, and for many of your kids. We have kids for whom that's not as easy. And so finding somebody who will actually believe in the success of the person, it turns out that as long as people have the confidence that somebody who they trust knows that they can do it, they do it. And that's an example where we need to build that kind of infrastructure in place. I view this as an infrastructure problem almost. You cannot rely on just volunteerism, et cetera. You got to structurally build this in. Building curricular and co-curricular and extracurricular spaces is part of this, because the less stressed you are, the more likely you are to succeed. And then the most important thing on social mobility is to figure out what happens on the back end. I'll give you another example. I told you about my favorite conversation this year, which was the freshman wanting to know how my day was. And
How was your day?
I have no idea. I can't remember the day. I only remember the conversation I had with him. My low point was a student who wanted to talk to me. I have a rule, which you should encourage your student to take advantage of if they see value, which says anybody who wants gets 20 minutes on Zoom. No questions asked. They can talk to me about anything they want. One conversation lasted 1 minute, and some have gone on the full time. It's a serious agenda. And one of the students wanted to talk to me about his career success. He had just gotten a job at Goldman, and he was very happy about it. So he wanted to tell me about it. So he set up a Zoom call, and I talked to him. And I asked him, how did you get your job at Goldman? And he said, the Groton network helped me out. Meaning his high school network was how he got the job. That was my low point in the last year at Tufts. Because I didn't go to Groton. Lots of people didn't go to Groton. If that is the basis by which our students get launched on their future careers, then we are not being true drivers of social mobility. If we are true drivers of social mobility, the playing field should be level on the back end.
Yes.
And so that's something that we have to work on. It's something that we really do need to do a lot more of. So
I would like to ask just a follow-up, because I agree with you, having someone who believes in you give you encouragement is hugely important. And I think there is a structural component, as you say. From our experience, we have a daughter who is the class of 21 who we talked about, and she had a moment in her first year where a professor took her aside and said, you are really good at this. You can be a mathematician. That can be a path for you in a way, and it made her rethink all of her world, her entire possibilities. And she became a math major and has now just finished a master's degree in a quantitative field. That conversation, just the conversation, and then that professor following up was really transformative. So my fundamental question is, how do you instill a culture like that? Because I think you've got it here. How do you sustain it? And how do you make sure that's reaching every student who comes?
yeah, I think there are two things there, right? One is the culture does exist, by the way. So the faculty
Oh, we've seen it. That's why we're sitting here. That's why we're excited to be here.
Yeah, the faculty care deeply about their students. I'm still working on a student who went off to do something in the real world when he really should be in a physics PhD program. And I in fact called his father recently and asked about it. This kid won every award in the physics department and decided to take a job that you and I would consider, no, I don't know about you, but I would consider completely pro forma, completely rote. Why would you take that job when you could go to physics department, work for 8 years, and then get a job making $80,000 a year as an assistant professor? I mean, come on. Where is your rationality? So that's what I do with him. Practically every time I run into him, he lives in the region. But on a more serious note, I think if you ease the burden on the faculty and the staff they have to take care of the people who are struggling first, which is what they should do, then they have more room and time to push the people on the other end of the spectrum who are doing just fine. So I think they go hand in hand. In fact, all these efforts to build social mobility makes the entire class better. That is, I don't view them as remedial at all. They just make all of it better. And they make it better by alleviating constraints, providing more capacity, and that will allow us to identify more such people. And the other thing we need to do, in fact, the biomedical engineering department did something interesting. They gave up accreditation. Now, this is a pretty big deal. They chose not to get accredited. And I spoke to the ABET accreditors when they came, and I said, we've chosen not to do this because you have taken so much choice away from our students. Your accreditation list of courses is so onerous that our students don't get to experiment as to whether they'll be better in math or in biomedical engineering or philosophy or political science. which they should. That's the whole point of liberal arts education. And so the other way in which we promote this is by making sure that the curricular constraints are not as onerous as they sometimes can be, right? So that's the other way to do this.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch gears a little and talk about rankings, right? I think most of us would agree that the reason why our children chose Tufts and the reason why Tufts chose our children has nothing to do with the ranking. It has to do with all the things we've talked about here today. But at the end of the day, sometimes we look at these lists and we hear folks like you talk about how special this place is, and we see a disconnect between the two. And I'd just love to get your perspective. It may be the same as the accreditation story where they're not asking the right questions, but what is your view on rankings, and is there anything that you think needs to be done about it?
Yeah, so it's easy for me to take the quasi-defensive high road and say, they don't matter because we got 36,000 applications last year. I don't have that hubris. One of the decisions in life that is made with the least amount of information is the choice of a college. I mean, think about it. You've come to the campus for 1 hour where one bright kid walks you around. You read and you know of 2 people from the same high school who went there and seemed to be doing well, and you've decided, oh, that's where I commit 4 years of my life. Now, the reason it doesn't hurt you is most places are good, right? So that's why, but you spend more time picking out a vacuum cleaner. So therefore, all information matters. Just like this Consumer Reports thing on, 3.56 stars versus 3.57 stars matters for buying a vacuum cleaner. I don't mean to belittle the choices you've made, but every information thing matters. We're not in every room talking to people like this. That said, we have to look behind the ranking and say, where are we getting dinged, and what is the reason for getting dinged? In our case, we get dinged on one thing primarily, social mobility. Because the rankings have moved, there was a very, very influential Brookings article about 10 years ago, which argued that the right way to rank a college is based on the economic value add to the student. So now, I don't completely agree that that is the sole way to rank things, the economic value add, but it is an important metric nonetheless. I'm not willing to discount it. That's where we fall short. We fall short because we take in fewer kids who are Pell eligible, and we have, and so that hurts us the most. And further, there are a couple of things. We have a differential some years between the graduation rate of our Pell students and the regular class, so that affects us a little. And finally, we don't have a business school or in the undergraduate program, so starting salaries hurt us a lot. The last one I'm least worried about, because the starting salary is not a good measure of the overall tendency, and if you look at our alumni, over 30 years, they do fine. But we do need to provide better investment in career services, so that not because we want them to have higher starting salaries, it's because we want them to have as many options as possible. And so therefore, the 3 things that I talked about, financial aid, bringing in broader class, advising and support for that, and career services, all will help with rankings. Right, but that's not the reason to do them, but still they will help with rankings.
So, I'm going to go back to a point you made earlier about tuition and ask you a more specific question. How do you think about the ambitious plans you've talked about, which aren't free, especially at the pub? I know it's going to be great, but it's not free, and increasing financial aid and accessibility and controlling the tuition costs? How do you balance those things?
Yeah, there are 3 things that we will do and one that we won't. So the one that is easiest to do is to become more efficient as an educational institution. So if we increase class sizes, if we grew the class, kept the faculty the same, etc., you would actually, I mean, the arithmetic is not difficult, you would actually end up saving. That ruins the essential character of Tufts. We'll simply not do it. On my watch, I don't intend to increase the undergraduate class. It's because our facilities have to catch up and our faculty has to catch up, everything else has to grow before we would reinvest. We want to keep that 10-to-1 or less student to faculty ratio. So because that's the whole hallmark of this education, that you get to know your faculty on a close range and so on. So that one we won't do, so efficiency. But there are other efficiencies we can get. We tend to be inefficient in how we do purchasing and how we operate because we're not as aggressive as a for-profit company as you would expect. People come to work for us because we're not a for-profit company. They're rarely as aggressive as, So that's something we can do. The two other things that we can do is diversifying our revenue portfolio, which, to go towards a more, looking at, for example, here's an interesting model, which is in the engineering school, they actually work out arrangements with large corporates. Eli Lilly in Indianapolis is an example where you can get a graduate degree at Tufts while remaining an employee of Eli Lilly, and Eli Lilly pays your tuition for that. And that's something, for example, that allows us to diversify our revenue base. And the last one is we have done well philanthropically, but we can do better. So we will raise more money, and we raised, just so you're oriented, about $175 million last year. And we believe we can do more than that. And so, because philanthropy is the other way in which we do this. But the basic question which people say, why can't you become more efficient? Because liberal arts education and efficiency don't go hand in hand. I went to an institution that was efficient. I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which is efficient. It's undergraduate engineering class is $3,200 a year. It admits 2 Tufts a year in just engineering. So then you're efficient, but that's not a good model for us.
Got it.
So before we turn to live questions, and I know many of you have sent them in. I see Josh over here going through them. I'd love to get your advice for us, right? I mean, you talked about students having someone who believes in them. I think those of us in the room would say, we believe in them, we believe in them. But what else can we do? What advice do you have so that we end up, at the end of 4 years, feeling like we had a great Tufts experience and our kids had a great Tufts experience?
So I want to give 2 disclaimers first, because I thought I had gotten you to like me, and now I'm going to make sure that won't happen. And so, and first disclaimer is, Sumati and I have no children, so you should take this with a pinch of salt. It's not, we don't have personal experience. The second is, this is from observing thousands of students over my entire career. As my wife's fond of pointing out, I've never had a real job. I went to a college campus at age 18 and never left. Literally, I've never left. And so with those 2 things in mind, I have only one advice for you. Whatever it is you're doing, do less of. And I mean this. They are more resilient. They are stronger than you think, and let them fall, let them stumble, and let them fight their own battles. Thank you. They'll be better, I think, for that.
Yeah, I really hate that advice, but I have to tell you that I've seen it work with my own kids, so I appreciate that advice, but I really don't like it. So I'm
my father used to say, "You still in school?" And he didn't mean this as a compliment, because I did an undergrad, a master's, then a PhD, and he just thought, when is this guy going to get a real job? And I never did. And so that was the kind of limit of parenting as far as I was concerned. So it worked out over.
Well, he did a great job, so thank you. I'm going to invite Josh Elst, the Senior Vice President for Advancement, to come up, because he's the one who's been curating the questions that
Well, you can just do
that
it from
you've
there.
been
Do it from
asking.
his chair.
Okay, I'll do it from his chair. Yeah.
So thank you. Lots of questions, so we'll probably just get to a few of them. But the first one, Sunil, I think you'll like a lot. It says, fast forward 15 years to your retirement. I knew you'd like that part. What do you
It's
want
not 15, it's 10, but keep going.
What do you want your most significant accomplishments to be during your leadership at Tufts?
So this is a, it would be a mistake for me to list 5 things I want to do because we don't know between now and 10 years what would be more pressing for us. But I would like us to have I think, significant more investments in the things that I talked about, on the student experience side, on facilities, because our previous 2 presidents, as thoughtful strategy, chose to prioritize people over buildings and so on. So I think for me, it's my turn. It's the least sexy of things to do, which is building dorms, but you have to do that. I think we have to raise a lot more money in financial aid. So having an endowment, one of the first lessons you learn in economics, of course, is that wealth appreciates faster than income. And we are starting from behind because our balance sheet, our endowment isn't quite where some of our peers are. And that requires us to work doubly hard. So that's something I would like to leave behind, an endowment that's significantly larger. And then the last one is our faculty on a per faculty basis are outstanding. If you look at their productivity and so on, they're really outstanding. There are just too few of them. Many of our departments are very small. And I'll give you an example. Our Earth and Climate Science department is outstanding. It's good. It's got 10 faculty. Right? That's not and if you only measure it by number of undergraduate majors, you'd be making a mistake because Earth and Climate Science can have a significant impact on society. And so I think that's the third thing. I'd like to leave a larger faculty, a larger endowment, and more buildings. and thereby leave a pretty big budget hole for my successor.
Well, as the chief fundraiser, I guess I have a lot of work to do. The next one is, how do you see higher education evolving in the coming years, and how are you preparing Tufts to take on the new opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, so I'll use AI as a case study, right? And generative AI as case study here. If you look at ChatGPT, I was in Hong Kong, I guess on Wednesday, and we had an event like this. And one of the local professors at a local university who was associated with Tufts was speaking with me. He said the way they're now grading assignments in the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology is they print out the ChatGPT answer and grade it, and then post that as this is a B-. So they actually give you the ChatGPT answer and the grade it would have received, and therefore then leave it to the students to figure out how to answer the question and to get a grade better than B-. So for me, and where I'm going with this is it basically, things get normed. A generation before mine, the ability to calculate got you a grade. The ability to use logarithms or a slide rule got you a grade. Today, nobody does that. My generation, in my field, optimization, the ability to solve an optimization problem got you a grade. Now Excel has something called solver. You press a button and it spits out the answer. Nobody teaches you what exactly goes behind Excel unless you're in a graduate class. So similarly, a lot of things that we are currently training students to do will be automated. And given that, what we have to teach them is how to build on that as a kind of basic substrate and go from there. And I think that's one way in which higher ed will change substantially, and it just has to. The other is, I think most of us will become one kind of experience within the walls and quite a different kind of experience for a lot more people outside our walls. We can't go to the model that unless you come here and spend 4 years or 2 years within these walls, we won't educate you. And while I don't see the undergraduate program changing, on the graduate side, this is no longer tenable. People don't want to get a master's in nutrition by giving up their job as a pediatrician somewhere else. They want to be a pediatrician and learn more about nutrition. So we have to find modalities that go well beyond our current modalities. I think that's going to happen. And that will also help with the broader public perception of elite higher ed, which I must admit isn't, thank God for Congress, otherwise it would look really bad. Right, so this is, so given this, and the last one is, if you ask, how do we serve the city of Boston, for example? It's straightforward. It's the hospitals that serve the city. We directly serve them. And so our direct care mission is something we'll have to figure out as well. This is something academic medical centers have not figured out. We haven't either. And I think we'll have to figure that one out. If you ask me what keeps me up at night, it's that. That's a difficult problem to solve.
All right, last one, because we just have a couple minutes left. I'll make it a fun one. What was the most recent book or article that was meaningful to you and why? And when do you find time to read?
So I read a very, very cool article yesterday in the New York Times, and it was on C. elegans. So C. elegans is a worm. It has 9... You thought I wasn't a nerd? I mean, come on. They don't make, socially well-adjusted people university presidents. So, of course, I spent my Friday night reading an article on a worm. And you should read it. C. elegans is a worm. It has 968 cells. They know exactly what those cells do. It's the first organism which has, in some fundamental sense, been completely understood. And why is that so important? First of all, it's a Nobel factory. The article identified 4 Nobel Prize winners who use C. elegans as a model, including one this year. But it turns out there are 4 more that, my wife and I dug up 2 more on our own. And then it turned out there were more informed people. Of course, we called everybody we knew about this article. This is truly exciting. The worm doesn't have eyes or anything, but it's still very exciting. And it is 8 Nobel Prizes, C. elegans models. And why is that so interesting for me? Because it is what academia is all about. We do toy things in class with the analog of 968 cells that our students then take and change the world with. So for me, C. elegans is a perfect example of what academia is all about. Plus, they look really creepy under the microscope.
Well, thank you so much. I know Gina's going to tell us what we do next, but this has been super illuminating, and I think all of you would agree that Sunil is a wonderful addition to the world of Tufts. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And also a wonderful addition to the world of Tufts are the Harknesses. They have been phenomenal for many years now, so I am very grateful. So with that, this session, our keynote is concluded. We have 5 lectures happening simultaneously now. The next one will be here at 11:15, led by Jack Derby from the Derby Institute. And the other 4 are in other locations. You have, as I said, the locations are on the QR code in the back of your name tags. They're also listed in a number of the different signs around campus. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you at the Arts Festival.